The world was quiet, but fear was loud. It was the year 1961. Space was still a dark mystery. No human had ever walked on the moon. No one truly knew what was waiting there. The sky looked peaceful, but behind that calm blue color, a dangerous race had already begun. America was worried. The Soviet Union had shocked the world. They had sent the first satellite into space. Then they sent the first man into orbit. Each success felt like a warning bell in Washington. America was falling behind, and the whole world was watching. Inside the White House, pressure was growing. President John F. Kennedy knew one thing very clearly. If America did not act fast, it would lose more than just a space race. It would lose power, respect, and trust. This was not only about space anymore. This was about pride. This was about the future. Late one night, Kennedy sat quietly, reading reports from NASA. The papers were full of problems. Rockets were failing. Astronauts were untested. Technology was weak. Nothing looked ready. Still, time was running out. Then came the desperate call. It was not a phone call that the public heard. It was a call for help. A call for courage. A call for something impossible. President Kennedy stood before Congress and the nation. His voice was calm, but the message was dangerous. He said America would send a man to the moon and bring him back safely before the decade ended. Many people were shocked. Some were afraid. Some believed it was madness. NASA engineers looked at each other in silence. They knew the truth. They were not ready. The technology did not exist yet. The computers were slow. The rockets exploded often. One small mistake could kill astronauts in seconds. But the promise was made. Now, there was no turning back. Inside NASA headquarters, the mood changed overnight. What once felt like research now felt like war. Engineers worked day and night. Sleep became rare. Mistakes became deadly. Every failure was painful. Rockets exploded during tests. Fire burned inside capsules. Astronauts trained knowing they might never come back. Families waited at home, pretending to be strong. The moon was far away, and it did not forgive mistakes. Years passed, and progress was slow but steady. Mission after mission tested new ideas. Some worked. Some failed. Each failure taught a lesson, but also added fear. Then came tragedy. A fire during a test mission killed 3 astronauts on the ground. The nation stopped breathing. NASA stopped everything. The dream felt cursed. People began to ask hard questions. Was the moon worth human lives? For a moment, it felt like the desperate call had gone too far. But quitting was not an option. The pressure returned stronger than before. The world was still watching. The Soviet Union was still moving forward. America had to stand up again. NASA fixed designs. Safety improved. Training became harder. Astronauts pushed their bodies and minds beyond limits. They learned to stay calm inside chaos. Slowly, confidence returned. By 1969, the mission had a name, Apollo 11. But even now, nothing was guaranteed. The 3 astronauts chosen for this mission understood the risk. They did not talk much about fear. They had accepted it long ago. Fear was part of the job. Behind closed doors, the truth was darker. NASA had prepared a speech for the president. It was not a victory speech. It was a death speech. If the astronauts were stranded on the moon, the world would hear goodbye words instead of celebration. Very few people knew this. The public saw smiles, flags, big rockets. Happy news. But behind the smiles, everyone knew one thing. Apollo 11 was still an experiment. The computer guiding the spacecraft was weaker than a modern calculator. The landing system had never been tested on the moon. Communication delays meant astronauts were often alone. If something went wrong, Help was millions of miles away. As launch day came closer, the tension was unbearable. Engineers checked numbers again and again. Astronauts trained in silence. Families hugged longer than usual. The desperate call made years ago was now becoming real. This was no longer a promise. This was a test of humanity. And once Apollo 11 left Earth, there would be no second chances. The moon was waiting. Cold, silent, unforgiving. And the world was about to find out if that desperate call would become history or tragedy. 3 men were chosen, not because they were fearless, not because they were lucky, but because they could stay calm when everything went wrong. NASA did not choose heroes. They chose survivors. The mission was Apollo 11, and history would remember 3 names. But before the world knew them, they were just men with heavy responsibility on their shoulders. Neil Armstrong was the commander. He was quiet. He spoke less. He listened more. Other astronauts noticed something different about him. When danger came close, his heart rate stayed low. When alarm screamed, his hand stayed steady. Neil did not chase glory. He accepted duty. Many at NASA believed he was perfect for the moon, not because he wanted to be first, but because he would not panic if things failed, and things were expected to fail. Buzz Aldrin was different. He was sharp, confident, always thinking. He knew systems, numbers, and procedures better than anyone else. Some called him difficult. Some called him intense. But when problems appeared, Buzz was ready. He believed deeply in the mission. He wanted success not for fame, but for meaning. For proof that humans could go beyond limits. Still, inside him, questions lived quietly. What if the moon did not let them leave? Michael Collins was the 3rd man. And the LONELIEC. He would not walk on the moon. He would not be seen on television stepping onto history. His job was to stay in orbit, alone, circling the moon again and again. If something failed, he would return to Earth alone. Collins understood this better than anyone. He once said that if his 2 crewmates died on the moon, people would remember them forever. But he would be the man who came back. That thought never left him. The 3 men trained together, but they carried fear alone. NASA pushed them harder every day. They trained underwater to feel weightless. They practiced emergency landings. They studied maps of the moon that were unclear and incomplete. They memorized procedures for problems that had never happened before. Every answer led to more questions. The moon was not friendly. It had no air, no sound, no mercy. One mistake during landing could turn the spacecraft into metal dust. One wrong switch could leave them trapped forever. Still, they smiled in public. Cameras loved them. Reporters asked easy questions. People waved flags and called them heroes. But at night, when the noise faded, the reality returned. Neil Armstrong often sat quietly, thinking about control. He knew the landing system was risky. He knew he might have to land manually, with fuel running out. Buzz Aldrin studied procedures again and again. He believed preparation could beat fear. But deep down, he knew preparation had limits. Michael Collins thought about silence. He would be out of radio contact for long minutes on the far side of the moon. No voice, no signal, just darkness and motion. He wondered if anyone truly understood what that felt like. NASA officials watched them closely. Psychologists checked their minds. Doctors checked their bodies. Engineers checked every word they spoke. One weak moment could remove them from the mission. So they stayed strong. Behind closed doors, another truth existed. NASA did not fully trust the mission. Backup plans existed for many failures, but not all. There was no rescue mission for the moon. If the engine failed, the astronauts would die there. The president's secret speech waited in a drawer. The world would never hear it unless everything went wrong. As launch day moved closer, Tension filled the air. Families felt it. Neil Armstrong's wife said goodbye without tears. She had learned that tears made things harder. She focused on details, on children, on routine. Buzz Aldrin's family tried to act normal. They laughed. They talked. But every goodbye felt heavier than the last. Michael Collins hugged longer than usual. None of them said, "I might not come back." They did not need to. The night before launch, the three men sat together one last time. They did not talk about history. They did not talk about fame. They talked about simple things. About flying. About machines. About trust. They trusted each other with their lives. Outside, the Saturn V rocket waited. Tall. Silent. Dangerous. It was the most powerful machine ever built by humans. But power did not mean safety. Inside its metal skin lived fire strong enough to shake the earth. Tomorrow, that fire would carry three men away from everything they had ever known. The moon was no longer a dream. It was a destination. And once they left the ground, fear would no longer be imagination. It would be real, because this mission was not about three men becoming legends. It was about three men facing the unknown, with no guarantee of return. The rocket did not look alive, but everyone knew it was. Standing on the launch pad was Saturn V, the largest, loudest, and most dangerous machine humans had ever built. It was taller than a 30-story building. Inside it lived controlled fire. Enough power to shake the planet, or destroy everything. Engineers respected it. Astronauts feared it. And the world trusted it. But trust was fragile. Saturn V was not a promise of safety. It was a gamble. Thousands of people worked on this rocket. Every bolt mattered. Every wire mattered. One loose connection could turn it into a flying bomb. The astronauts knew this. Neil Armstrong looked at the rocket calmly, but his mind was busy. He had flown dangerous aircraft before. He had survived crashes. But this was different. This time, he could not escape. Buzz Aldrin studied numbers. Thrust, fuel pressure, engine timing. He knew the rocket was powerful, but power without control meant death. Michael Collins thought about the first 2 minutes. Because if something went wrong, it would happen then. NASA had a dark saying. If Saturn V fails on the pad, no one survives. The countdown began days before launch. Engineers checked systems again and again. They ran tests they had already run 100 times. Still, doubt stayed. The weather caused worry. Strong winds, thick clouds, lightning risk. Nature did not care about history. If conditions were wrong, the mission could end before it began. Inside the command module, the astronauts climbed in. It was small, tight, filled with switches. There was no room to stand, no room to move freely. Once inside, they were locked in. Trapped. The hatch closed. That sound was final. Now, they could not leave on their own. Neil Armstrong lay on his back, staring upward. Above him were millions of pounds of fuel. Below him was Earth. Between life and death were thin metal walls. Buzz Aldrin listened to radio calls. Voices sounded calm, but tension was hidden. Too many things had to go right. Michael Collins checked displays. Green lights were good. Red lights meant disaster. Outside, the rocket waited. The countdown reached the final minutes. Every second felt heavy. T-10 minutes. Fuel flowed. Valves opened. The rocket began to breathe. T-5 minutes. The computers took control. Humans stepped back. Now machines were making. DECISIONST. 1 minute. Silence filled the capsule. The astronauts stopped talking. This was the point of no return. T-10 seconds. Heartbeats slowed. Muscles tightened. Fire was about to be born. Ignition. The engines lit below them. The ground shook. The sound was not noise. It was force. For a moment. Nothing happened. Then Saturn V began to rise, slowly, almost gently. But everyone knew the truth. If engines failed now, there was no escape. The rocket climbed higher. Faster. The astronauts felt pressure crush them into their seats. Their bodies grew heavy. Breathing became harder. Earth fell away. Below them, fire and smoke disappeared into distance. But danger stayed close. During ascent, any small error could break the rocket apart. Vibrations shook the spacecraft violently. The rocket screamed as it fought gravity. Neil Armstrong stayed. Focused. Buzz Aldrin watched gauges. Michael Collins listened for warnings. No one spoke unless needed. Then came stage. Separation. Explosions. Planned ones. First stage dropped away. The second ignited. A violent jolt shook the capsule. For a brief second, the astronauts felt weightless. Then, push returned. They were moving faster than sound, higher than any human before them. Outside, the sky turned black. Stars appeared in daylight. Earth became a blue curve. Finally, the engines shut down. Silence. They were in space. Alive. But no one celebrated. Because reaching space was only the beginning. The rocket had done its job, but the mission was far from safe. Now, they were on a path toward the moon. No turning back. No rescue. No second chance. Saturn V had not killed them. Yet. And that made the danger even more real, because the hardest part was still waiting. Far beyond Earth. Silence arrived suddenly. Not the quiet of a room, but the deep, endless silence of space. Apollo 11 was now floating between two worlds. Earth was behind them. The moon was still far ahead. There was no ground below. No sky above. Only darkness. For the first time, the astronauts truly understood where they were. Michael Collins looked out the small window. Earth appeared like a bright blue marble. Beautiful. Fragile. Distant. Home was already far away. Neil Armstrong focused on the mission. Spaceflight was calm on the outside, but full of danger inside. Every system had to work perfectly. Oxygen, power, navigation. There was no help if something failed. Buzz Aldrin checked lists again and again. Procedures gave him comfort. But space was not friendly to comfort. Small problems started quietly. A warning light blinked, then stopped. A sensor showed strange numbers. Communication had short delays. Each tiny issue raised a big question. Was this normal? Or the beginning of failure? NASA listened carefully from Earth, but signals traveled slowly. Advice came late. Decisions often had to be made alone. The astronauts were trained for this. Still, training could not remove fear. Outside the window, stars did not move. There was no up or down. The mind struggled to understand. Michael Collins thought about isolation. Soon, when they reached the moon, he would be completely alone. When Apollo 11 went behind the moon, radio contact would disappear. No voice. No answers. Only silence. He wondered how many humans had ever felt this alone. Buzz Aldrin tried to sleep, but sleep was difficult. The spacecraft was noisy with fans and clicks. His body floated without weight. His mind stayed awake. He thought about the moon's surface. Hard? Soft? Deadly? No one truly knew. Neil Armstrong stayed calm, but even he felt the pressure. The landing system was new. The moon had no air. No second chances. If the computer failed, he would have to land manually. That thought stayed close. Hours passed slowly. The astronauts ate simple food. They spoke in short sentences. Every word was measured. Then came the moment of truth. The engine fired again. This burn would send them toward the moon. If it failed, they would drift forever. Michael Collins watched the timer. Neil Armstrong held control steady. Buzz Aldrin monitored systems. The engine burned perfectly. Apollo 11 changed direction. Now, there was no return to Earth without passing the moon. The moon grew larger each hour. It was not friendly or bright. It was gray, silent, covered in shadows. It looked ancient. As they got closer, strange shapes appeared. Craters, mountains, deep darkness. This was not the moon of stories. This was something else. Soon, they would reach lunar orbit, and that meant separation. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would enter the lunar module. Michael Collins would stay behind. The loneliest job in history was about to begin. Michael did not show fear, but he felt it. If the lunar module failed to return, he would go home alone. He would have no choice. The world would call him lucky, but he would know the truth. The spacecraft moved quietly through space. The moon filled the window. Now. Close, massive, unforgiving. Apollo 11 was no longer traveling. It was approaching destiny. And somewhere in that gray silence, danger was waiting, because the moon does not forgive mistakes, and soon they would test that truth. The landing began quietly. Too quietly. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin moved into the lunar module. It was called Eagle. Thin walls, small space, weak computer. This tiny machine would decide life or death. Michael Collins watched from orbit. Soon, Eagle separated from the command module. A small push, a slow drift, then silence. Now, there were two spacecraft, two paths, one chance. Neil Armstrong took control. Buzz Aldrin read numbers aloud. The moon was below them. No air, no sound, no mercy. As Eagle moved closer, the computer suddenly spoke. An alarm. Buzz Aldrin froze. Another alarm. Then another. Neil Armstrong asked calmly, "What is it?" Buzz checked the screen. The computer was overloaded. Too much data. Too many commands. If the computer failed completely, the landing would fail. NASA heard the alarms. Control rooms filled with tension. Engineers searched fast. Seconds felt like years. Then a voice from Earth came back. "Alarm is okay. You are go." But the danger was not over. As Eagle dropped lower, Neil Armstrong looked out the window. Something was wrong. Below them was not flat ground. It was covered in rocks. Huge rocks. Craters everywhere. If they landed here, Eagle would tip over. The mission would end. In seconds. Neil made a decision. He took manual control. This was not planned. Fuel started to drop fast. Buzz Aldrin called out numbers. Altitude, speed, fuel. Every word cut deeper. The moon rushed closer. Neil searched for a safe place. Dust rose up, blocking vision. Fuel warning light came on. 30 seconds left. NASA held their breath. Buzz's voice stayed steady, but his heart was racing. Fuel low. Neil kept moving forward. 10 seconds. No safe landing. Yet. If fuel reached zero, Eagle would crash. 5 seconds. Then Neil saw it. A small flat area. He brought Eagle down. Dust exploded around them. Contact light. Neil shut the engine off. Silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Neil Armstrong said the words the world was waiting for. "The Eagle has landed." On Earth, people cried. NASA cheered. History was made. But inside Eagle, the truth was darker. They were alive, but barely. Fuel left. Less than 20 seconds. One small delay, and they would have died. Buzz Aldrin looked at Neil. They did not smile. They knew how close disaster had been. Outside, the moon waited. Inside, fear remained. Because landing was only half the battle, they still had to leave. And the moon does not easily let go. Inside the lunar module, Time stopped. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did not move for a moment. Their hands were still. Their minds were loud. They had landed on the moon, but survival was not guaranteed yet. Outside, the moon was silent. No wind. No sound. No life. Inside Eagle, alarms were quiet now, but danger was still present. One wrong move could tear the suit. One wrong switch could end everything. Neil Armstrong began preparing to exit. Every step was slow. Every action was careful. Buzz Aldrin watched him closely. He checked oxygen levels, pressure, power. Nothing could be missed. NASA spoke from Earth, but their voices felt far away. The moon made all signals late. In this moment, the astronauts were truly alone. Neil opened the hatch. Darkness waited. The ladder looked simple, but it was not. Below, it was a surface no human had ever touched. No one knew how it would react. Would it hold? Would it break? Would it swallow him? Neil moved down slowly, one step, then another. His heart was calm, but his thoughts were heavy. If he slipped, history would change forever. Buzz Aldrin watched from above. Holding his breath. Neil reached the last step. His boot hovered above the surface. This was the moment the world would remember. But inside Neil's mind, fear lived quietly. He placed his foot down. The moon did not move. The surface held him. Neil spoke the famous words, but they were chosen carefully. His voice was calm. His message was controlled. The world heard history, but they did not hear his fear. Buzz Aldrin followed soon after. He stepped onto the moon and looked around. Gray dust, sharp shadows, endless silence. The moon felt ancient. Every movement was strange. Gravity was weak. Bodies felt light, but danger felt heavy. They planted the flag. It moved strangely, not by wind, but by motion. They collected samples. They took photos. They worked quickly. Time was limited. Their suits were strong, but not perfect. A small tear could mean death in minutes. The cold was extreme. The heat was unforgiving. Buzz Aldrin looked at Earth, a small, blue dot so far away. He realized something then. No one could help them. If the engine failed, Earth would only watch. Back inside the lunar module, another secret waited. NASA had prepared a message, a goodbye message. If Neil and Buzz could not leave the moon, the president would speak to the world. The astronauts would be remembered as heroes who never returned. Neil knew this. Buzz knew this. They did not talk about it. After a short time, it was over. The moonwalk ended. Neil and Buzz climbed back inside Eagle. They closed the hatch. Silence returned. They sat quietly. They had done what no human had done before. But the most dangerous part was still ahead. Leaving the moon. Because landing was difficult. But taking off from the moon was a risk no one had ever tested, and the moon does not forgive second mistakes. The moon did not say goodbye. It stayed silent as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin prepared for the most dangerous moment of their lives. Taking off. No one had ever done this before. Landing was hard, but leaving was worse. Inside the lunar module, everything felt fragile. The walls were thin. The engine below them had been sitting in extreme cold and heat. No one knew if it would start. If it failed, they would die on the moon. There was no rescue plan. No second engine. No backup. Neil Armstrong checked the controls slowly. His face was calm, but his mind was sharp. This was not a time for hope. This was a time for precision. Buzz Aldrin read the checklist. Every word mattered. Outside, the moon waited. It had gravity, but not forgiveness. Then came a frightening thought. If the ascent engine did not ignite, Michael Collins would be forced to return to Earth alone. Michael knew this. Orbiting above the moon, he moved in silence. Every time his spacecraft passed behind the moon, radio contact disappeared. During those long minutes, he was completely alone. No voices. No signals. No comfort. He thought about Neil and Buzz below him. Were they alive? Were they ready? Would he ever see them again? Back on the moon, the moment arrived. Neil Armstrong placed his hand near the switch. Buzz Aldrin stopped reading. There was nothing more to say. This was it. Neil activated the engine. For a split second, nothing happened. That moment felt endless. Then the engine ignited. The lunar module shook violently. Fire pushed it upward. They were lifting off the moon. Neil and Buzz felt the force press them back. Dust exploded below them. The surface fell away fast. They were leaving alive. But danger was not finished. No, they had to meet Michael Collins in orbit. One wrong angle. One wrong speed. And they would miss him forever. Michael watched his instruments closely. A small dot appeared. Then another. The lunar module was coming. Relief washed over him, but focus stayed strong. Docking in space was never easy. Two machines. High speed. Perfect timing. Slowly, carefully, they connected. The lock engaged. The hatch opened. 3 men were together again. No cheers. No shouting. Just quiet relief. We're still alive. But Earth was still far away. The moon drifted behind them. Cold. Silent. Unchanged. They did not look back for long, because one final danger remained. Coming home. And space never promises safe returns. The journey home began quietly. There was no celebration in space. No music. No applause. Only 3 men floating inside a small spacecraft, moving away from the moon. The moon stayed behind them. Cold. Silent. Unchanged. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins did not speak much. They were tired. Their bodies ached. Their minds were still processing what had just happened. They had done the impossible. But space was not finished with them. Yet the spacecraft slowly turned toward Earth. Small blue dot appeared in the distance. It looked peaceful, safe, but getting there was still dangerous. One last engine burn was needed. If this burn failed, Apollo 11 would drift endlessly into space. No rescue, no return. Just silence forever. Neil Armstrong checked the controls. Buzz Aldrin confirmed the numbers. Michael Collins watched the clock. The engine fired. The spacecraft changed direction. Earth was now there. Destination. For the first time since launch, hope felt real. But space does not like hope. Small problems returned. A temperature reading moved higher than expected. A signal cut out for seconds. The heat shield, their only protection during re-entry, could not be tested. If it failed, the capsule would burn like firewood. No one talked about this fear. They all knew it. As they moved closer to Earth, the planet grew larger. Clouds became visible. Blue oceans. White storms. Green land. Home. But home was still locked behind. Fire. The astronauts prepared for re-entry. This was the most violent part of the mission. The spacecraft would hit Earth's atmosphere at extreme speed. The heat would rise higher than the surface of the sun. The capsule would shake. Communication would disappear. For several minutes, the world would not know if they were alive. Inside the capsule, everything was tight, straps pulled across their bodies, helmets locked, breathing steady. Neil Armstrong closed his eyes for a moment. Buzz Aldrin whispered a short prayer. Michael Collins stared forward. The capsule hit the atmosphere. Fire exploded around them. The shaking began. Sound was like thunder trapped inside. Metal. Heat pushed against the shield. Outside, Plasma blocked all radio signals. On Earth, NASA lost contact. The world waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. Every second felt like an hour. Inside the capsule, the astronauts felt the pressure crushing them. Their bodies became heavy. Breathing was hard. Vision blurred. The capsule shook violently. If the heat shield cracked, even slightly, everything would end instantly. No one could help them now. This was the final test. Then, slowly, the shaking reduced. The heat faded. The fire disappeared. A parachute deployed. Then another. Then another. The capsule slowed. Water appeared below. Pacific Ocean waited. With a loud splash. Apollo 11 hit the sea. The mission was over. They had returned. Alive. For a moment, no one spoke. And laughter. Relief. Tears. On Earth. Cheers exploded. People cried in the streets. Radio screamed the news. History had survived, but the astronauts were not free yet. There was another fear. What if they brought something back? No one knew if the moon carried unknown bacteria. No one knew if humans could safely return. So the astronauts were taken into quarantine, locked inside a small room, separated from families, watched closely. Neil Armstrong saw his children through glass. Buzz Aldrin waved to his family. Michael Collins smiled quietly. We're heroes, but still prisoners. Days passed. Doctors tested them. Scientists watched. Nothing happened. No sickness. No danger. Finally, the doors opened. They were free. The world welcomed them like legends. Parades filled the streets. Flags waved. People shouted their names. But the astronauts felt different. They were not the same men who had left Earth, had seen something rare. They had seen Earth from far away. From space, borders did not exist. Countries did not matter. Politics disappeared. There was only one planet. One home. Neil Armstrong spoke carefully in public. He avoided big words. He avoided drama. But his message was clear. Humanity was small. Buzz Aldrin struggled privately. Fame was loud. The moon had been quiet. Adjusting was hard. Michael Collins returned to normal life more easily. He wrote. He reflected. He understood his role better with time. Years passed. Technology grew. People asked questions. Why did we stop going to the moon? Did something go wrong? Was it too expensive? Too dangerous? Or did the moon change us more than we expected? Apollo 11 became history. Moment frozen in time. But behind the famous images lived another truth. This mission was not easy. It was not safe. It was not guaranteed. It was a risk taken by humans who accepted fear and moved forward anyway. The moon did not welcome them. It tested them. And they survived. Apollo 11 was not just about landing on the moon. It was about proving that humans could face the unknown and return. Even today, when people look up at the moon, they see mystery, but they also see possibility. Because once 3 men went there. They stood on another world. And they came back to tell the story. Not as gods, not as legends, but as humans. And that is why Apollo 11 changed the world forever.